Billionaire Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, doesn't just make cool cars anymore. He's now the single biggest shareholder of Twitter and is joining the social media company's board of directors. Could this mean that the wokesters may lose one of their favorite tools of information suppression and propaganda dissemination? Well, answer to that lies in tonight's Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Oh, go woke and you go broke, or at least you get bought partially by a very rich guy, the richest guy in the world, in fact. So I guess he is the richest. And here's what's going on. We have Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, who has decided that enough is enough, and the wokesters will no longer be able to get away with, we hope, if he does what he says he's going to do, or if he takes the actions that people have been hoping all along he would, we'll be in a situation where Elon Musk turns Twitter into at least close to a free speech platform. Right now, it's a rigged game. You got all these lefty blue checks can say whatever crazy crap they want on there, but man, you question masks, or you say there was election fraud, or you just beat up on some lib lunatic, blue check, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the penalty box and you're getting all kinds of trouble for this. And it doesn't go the other direction, right? If you're a conservative, they can trash you, drag you, it's all fine. And they'll suppress you, they'll shadow ban you, you won't even be able to reach your followers. It's a rigged game, bottom line. Twitter, which is the public square for journalists, media, news coverage, and therefore enormously influential in the information space, may now become a place that alternate ideas are actually able to be shared. Twitter's CEO Parag Agrawal, after Elon Musk took a 9% stake in the company, is now on the board. He said, "I'm excited to share that we're appointing Elon Musk to our board. Through conversations with Elon in recent weeks, it became clear to us he would bring great value to our board. He's both a passionate believer and intense critic of the service, which is exactly what we need on Twitter and in the boardroom to make us stronger in the long term. Welcome, Elon." Now, let me just say, Parag Agrawal is not somebody who believes that the First Amendment is important in the context of Twitter. Doesn't believe that they should try to adhere to free speech principles. Conversational health is the goal, as we're told. That's the primary thing that the CEO of Twitter wants, and that's just an excuse for left-wing censorship, just so we're all clear. That's what that actually turns into. It shuts down people like me who say that masks, for example, don't work as a policy, which they don't. They just don't. Sorry, libs. Very clear now. All the data shows it. But you can't say it on Twitter or you'll get shut down. Well, let's hope that changes soon. Elon Musk responded to the CEO of Twitter, Agrawal, with this: "Looking forward to working with Parag and the Twitter board to make significant improvements to Twitter in the coming months." Well, wouldn't that be great? And let's just hope that when he says significant improvements, he means to go scorched earth against the wokeness that is so awful. And we'll get into that in just a moment here. Elon, back on the 26th of March, tweeted this out, on Twitter, "Given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy." Well, let's just take a look at some of the places where that democracy has been fundamentally undermined. For example, we've gone through a 2-year-long pandemic where Twitter has decided that it will not allow certain things to be said, even when there's very clear good faith debate about policy decisions, whether it's masking or vaccine mandates or vaccine effectiveness. Just remember, folks, the CDC a year ago said if you get the shot, you won't get sick, you won't spread it, you're good. Now we know none of that is true. It may make you less likely to get severely ill as long as you're within the window of protection, which lasts a few months, and oh, by the way, doesn't really apply to future variants. That's quite a different thing, isn't it? Maybe we would have been in a better place with regard to our health policy during the pandemic if people had been able to hash this stuff out in public on Twitter. But instead, you would get "this is misleading" warnings, or you would get straight up banned, as my friend Alex Berenson was banned from Twitter for saying vaccines don't work very well. And here's a Shock, folks. He was right. The vaccines for COVID do not work very well. They work a little bit when it comes to reduction of hospitalization and death for a period of time. That's not what we were promised, but Twitter shut all that stuff down. Then there's the Hunter Biden laptop controversy. The New York Post breaks a story about Hunter Biden's laptop, and Twitter shuts that down. Notice how it all goes in the same direction. It all benefits the Democrats and the left at the expense of not just the right, but of truth. Somehow the suppression of information that occurs isn't happenstance, it isn't random, it's whatever best serves the ideas and the power of the Democrat Party. Elon Musk sees this and he's hoping to step in and do something. I hope he's not the only billionaire out there who realizes that just allowing this to continue, allowing for wokeness to be this brain virus that corrodes all the major institutions, cultural, communications, educational, all across America, that this is a major threat. This is a serious challenge to the future of this country because we live in a digital era. This is how communication happens. And trust me, if we don't push back on stuff like Twitter's clear partisan censorship, what do you think is stopping Google from doing? Oh, well, they're already doing a lot of that, of course. What do you think stops Facebook? Oh, no, Facebook's already doing it too. Find me a mass communication tool right now that relies on the internet, and I'll find you a place where the left and the wokesters have dug in and they have achieved information dominance and are engaged in censorship, which they often lie about, by the way, too. They pretend that it's not happening until they're caught red-handed, and then they say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Well, turns out there are some things that can be done about it. And then there's just the urgency of this moment in American history where, as I said, the brain virus of wokeness is so destructive and so vicious. Here's Elon Musk on a podcast just a couple of months ago saying that wokeness, which is just political correctness weaponized by the left, is actually a danger to civilization. It is divisive. It is hateful.
It is a prevalent mind virus and arguably one of the biggest threats to modern civilization. Wokeness basically wants to make comedy illegal, which is not cool. Do we want a humorless society that is simply rife with condemnation and hate, basically?
And no forgiveness, right?
Yeah. At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason. It gives them a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue.
It gives mean people a shield to be mean and cruel, and all the time in the cloak or in the armor of false virtue. That is an excellent definition, really gets right to the heart of what wokeness is, which is now the animating ideology, really the animating theory, philosophical theory of the American left today. It is based on destruction and hatred and power dynamics, all rooted in envy and viciousness and division. So Elon sees it and looks like he's taking action on it. All right, in defiance of medical science and, of course, logic, New York City Mayor Eric Adams recently announced that children aged 2 to 4 will have to remain masked while in daycare and preschool. New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz is saying, enough is enough. She's going to join us with more on that in a second. Look, we're living in chaotic times. Foreign identity thieves online, they love the chaos. American homeowners are a favorite target for them. It's not just your credit cards they're after. That's small-time stuff, and the credit card companies will handle that, right? These hackers want your home. It's called home title theft. And no, you're not covered by basic homeowners insurance or common ID theft services. Here's the problem. The title to your home is kept online, believe it or not. And the bad guys, these cyber thieves, they forge your signature on a quitclaim deed, and then they act as though they own your home. They take out loans against it. You don't find out until, guess what? An eviction notice arrives. Register your address at Home Title Lock today. See if you're already a victim. This is how we protect our most valuable asset. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Again, HomeTitleLock.com. And we'll be right back with more. Hold the line. Over the weekend, furious parents heckled New York City Mayor Eric Adams in the streets, chanting, "Unmask our toddlers." This comes after the mayor and his health commissioner announced that children aged 2 to 4 will have to remain masked in daycare and preschool settings. I mean, it's completely insane. Let's just all say this is completely nuts. These people are out of their minds. In her latest op-ed, New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz says, "Enough is enough." She writes, quote, "New Yorkers must demand an end to Adams' toddler mask mandate. They should simply say no more patience, and certainly no more grace. The commissioner doesn't deserve it. His policies make no scientific sense, and at a saner time, New Yorkers would call for his firing." Carol joins us now to discuss. Carol, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Buck.
So the mayor went back on his word to lift the mandate on all kids. And he says he's following the advice of his health commissioner and pivoting because of more COVID cases. I don't know. I honestly now, I just want to find everybody who agrees with this and shout in their faces that they're morons, because this is like, it's beyond the pale at this point.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think you picked one of my tamer lines, because I was mad in this piece. I mean, that health commissioner is just, I don't have words for somebody who will mask toddlers at any point during the pandemic, but especially now, April 2022, where we know that the masks have done absolutely zero. But in addition to that, we know that the damage that they cause is going to be long lasting. So it's a policy that couples absolutely no positive effect with a lot of negative effects. And yet this health commissioner is pushing it, and this mayor is just eating it up. And you know, the worst part about it, as I mentioned in the piece, is that part of the argument against a lawsuit filed against the city was that this will be lifted on April 4th. So there's really no need for this lawsuit to continue. And then, of course, they extended it.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing games here, obviously, right? There's a dishonesty even within the legal system and how this is handled. The mayor sent a judge in Staten Island, right, said that this is capricious and arbitrary. And then the mayor sends his legal team on Friday night in New York City to go and bring it to an appellate judge to get overturned because they said there was going to be an egregious harm. That was the actual language used. Egregious harm if children don't show up on Monday with masks on. COVID hospitalizations, we have this data for kids under 18, 0.5 per 100,000 have been for months. The over 70 set in terms of age group is 4.7 per 100,000. And they walk around the city in bars, everywhere, maskless. Someone please, I mean, Carol, I really, I know you've been on the front lines of this fight for a long time. Is the new health commissioner of New York City a total moron, or is Eric Adams an idiot? Like, what is the problem?
I've truly gotten to the point where I think so many of our health officials are compromised in one way or another. I really realized that when Randy Weingarten helped design CDC policy about whether schools should open. There's absolutely a political angle here. Just because we don't know what it is doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. This kind of thing really does turn people into conspiracy theorists, because when nothing makes sense, you try to look for something that could explain it. And that's where the conspiracy theories come into play. And so I get why so many more people have such a deep distrust of everything on every part of our system. And it's going to be problematic going forward. It's going to be really hard, I think, to get parents to agree to any new vaccine at this point. Forget about COVID, if they come up with a vaccine for something else, I think parents are going to be reluctant. And I think it's because we were lied to for so long, and because this kind of thing still goes on.
Mayor Adams' administration fired a mom who was working at the city in the Department of Law, working for New York City, because she posed as a reporter. That's what they're saying. I think she just went to the press conference. I don't know if she had a fake, had a reporter disguise on, but she went to a press conference and she grilled Adams, the mayor, about why kids are being masked still, at least the toddlers are. Sure. Here's what she said to him. Watch this one.
3 weeks ago, you told parents to trust you, that you would unmask our toddlers. 10 days ago, you stood right here and you said that the masks would come off on April 4th. That has not happened. You reneged on your promise, and not only did you renege on your promise, you had your lawyers race to court on Friday night to overturn a state court. When will you unmask our toddlers?
Thank you. As I stated, as you indicated, I made the announcement that we were looking to announce today, which is Monday, to take the mask off to 2 to 4 years old. But I also stated, if we see an uptick, we will come back. I'm living up to my promises. If I have to pivot and shift and have other adults do something different, I'm going to do so.
It feels like he's at the end there just saying, well, maybe we're going to mask up everybody, as if that's a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly where this is heading. I think they don't want to take the masks off of the toddlers, at least in part, because I think they're going to have it back on everybody soon enough. But it's sickening to watch that. I know Daniela Jumpel from Twitter for over 2 years. She's been a steadfast advocate for kids' rights, for kids going back to school, for kids being prioritized. And, this isn't a conservative. This is a liberal who lives in New York City who's just had enough of kids being last all the time. I really feel for her. I hope she sues them. I hope she wins. And this was just a real travesty. And this has been happening too. This is the other thing that I want to say is that people being fired for COVID-related opinions has become a standard thing. And I think that we need to, as we talk about cancel culture and everybody just says, the left just says, oh, don't worry, you won't be canceled if you're not racist. This is yet another example that has nothing to do with having objectionable opinions and people being completely fired or just having their lives destroyed for having very stable, normal opinions that frankly the rest of the people end up adapting anyway.
New York City Health Commissioner Ashwin Vasan, who's the new health commissioner, again, I wonder if this guy's a moron or a coward or a combination of the two. He tweeted out that we want to keep an eye, or rather put out this statement, on this latest uptick to ensure that our youngest New Yorkers remain safe as we see an increase in cases due to the more infectious BA2 subvariant. As we know in the past, cases and hospitalizations have risen in this vulnerable age group in line with wider community spread. Is he illiterate? Does he not have access to the internet? They're the least, everyone agrees who looks at the data, the least vulnerable age group by far are young children, the ones that are the least likely. In fact, now I just spoke to Dr. Marty McCary about this, Carol, a few days ago. There's a case to be made that not a single healthy child under the age of 12 who was otherwise healthy actually died from COVID in this country. When you take out other, comorbidities, being born without a functioning immune system, things like that. And he's referring to it as a vulnerable age group.
Every single child death is, horrible and sad, but you're absolutely right. This has been a virus that largely does not target kids, and the fact that we still have health commissioners of major cities pushing just nonsense, like really snake oil nonsense on us, is ridiculous. He posted a chart where it showed the uptick in New York City. And, I agree, the numbers are, definitely trending a little bit up. But the lowest segment of the COVID case population is the 0 to 4-year-olds because they're just not susceptible to it the way other people are. Age is actually the main component of this COVID thing. The older you are, the more dangerous it is to you. And this, if you want to go through childhood, the 0 to 4 are the most protected from this. It's just absurd to me that we're still having this conversation in April 2022. It really kills me that we have to continue to talk about this. And as these people are basically putting leashes on kids and being like, hope this works.
Just real quick, Carol, do you think if they bring back a widespread mask mandate in New York City, I know you're down in Florida now, former New Yorker, God bless. Do you think that people will actually go along with it? Because I think they will. I think people will.
I absolutely think they will. I have not seen a single thing to say that they won't. The protests against the toddler masking have been very encouraging to me, but this really is just the most insane thing possible. I just don't think you're going to see this kind of protest for masking of adults. I think New Yorkers will go right back to it. They'll say, we're just staying safe. Nobody will question anything. And that's how things will go on. It's really sad. I hate watching my city die like this, really.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you down in Florida. Thanks, Carol.
Come on.
Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is expected to be confirmed this week after the Senate Judiciary Committee advanced her nomination. We'll have more on that and the Republicans who are supporting this nominee with senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, Will Chamberlain. First, I want to talk to you about protecting your online data. A lot of companies promise your privacy is guaranteed. We know that's not true. That's why you need a new privacy and cybersecurity application tool called Secure. It's spelled S-E-K-U-R. Secure is using proprietary encryption and offering secure instant messaging and email. With Secure, all of your communication is based on servers and data centers hosted in Switzerland without using any of the big tech platforms. Privacy is a big issue now. Without real security, people can read your emails, messages, even your bank information. That's why you need Secure, your solution to stop the constant theft of your digital identity. Costs only $5 for the messenger, only $10 for the messenger and email combination package. Go to secure.com and take back your privacy today. That's secur.com and use promo code BUCK for 25% off. We'll be right back with more. Hold the line. Whether it's voting to convict former President Donald Trump or flip-flopping on his support for Joe Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Senator Mitt Romney of Utah has proven once again you just can't trust him on our side of the aisle. Last night, Romney took to Twitter to announce his support for Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson. In his statement, he said, after reviewing Judge Jackson's record and testimony, I've concluded that she is a well-qualified jurist and a person of honor. While I do not expect to agree with every decision she may make on the court, I believe that she has more than what meets the standard of excellence and integrity. I congratulate Judge Jackson on her expected confirmation and look forward to her continued service to our nation. Joining me now to discuss this, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, Esquire, Will Chamberlain, or Will Chamberlain Esquire, as the case may be. Will, good to see you.
Good to be with you, Buck.
Let's start with some Romney time here. I got to tell you, on radio today, I talked about this, and I've got a great station out in Salt Lake City, and the lines were alight with Utahns who were very unhappy with Mitt Romney. And this isn't the first time. They were all pointing out, I think this is important, he's kind of a repeat offender with the mask vote that he took on planes and the marching with BLM with the mask on outside and all this stuff.
Yeah, also the sole Republican senator to vote for impeachment. I think on the first impeachment, remember, not a single Republican House member defected on the original impeachment over the Ukraine phone call, but Mitt Romney voted to impeach the sitting president of his own party over nonsense. This isn't the first time, obviously. I think, Utah made a huge mistake back in 2018. Trump made a huge mistake giving him as an endorsement. That was not obvious why that should happen. But it's just another example. And I think the biggest and most obvious problem here is that Mitt Romney voted against Judge Jackson's confirmation to the D.C. Circuit, last year? What changed? Was she was unfit for a mid-level appellate court, but she's suddenly fit to be a Supreme Court justice? I'm sorry, that needs some explaining.
And what do you think the explanation is? Is it Mitt just wants some crumbs from the New York Times editorial page table, or what?
I think he has, as some of the establishment conservatives like NRO do, they have some problem with the line that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz took. I mean, I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. Maybe they just think, it was unfair to ask Judge Jackson about her wildly lenient sentences for child porn offenders. I mean, that was actually a line some of these establishment conservatives were taking, that it was just absurd to ask her why she sentenced a guy who had a guidelines range of 90 months or something to only 3 months in jail. And apparently, but really the establishment conservatives thought this was just an unfair attack. And so maybe Mitt Romney decided, it's like, well, this is fine. She's fine. And it's part of his almost like his habit of just sticking a finger in the eye of the people who he thinks have wronged him, I guess.
Mitt Romney said that he had a chance to sit down with KBJ in a meeting, and this is what he said. Watch.
We had a good meeting yesterday. She is a qualified, intelligent, capable person, obviously very gracious, and I'm looking at her record and judicial philosophy, and we'll make a decision, and we'll announce that when I have it, but probably not until the day of the vote.
Yeah, I don't think he learned anything new in the meeting.
I mean, it's like, the thing about it is, okay, judicial philosophy, let's say you were taking that seriously. Well, she's like, I don't have a judicial philosophy. I have a methodology, which I've shown in my decisions. Well, all that means is you're trying to come to the right decision. Well, congratulations. So is every judge in every case. Like that's meaningless. Like, I look at the text. Well, so does everybody. Nobody decides to completely ignore the text of the law as a general matter when they're making judicial decisions. So I don't know. I was thoroughly unimpressed with KBJ from the beginning. I think what her actions show and her decisions show is a lack of good judgment, which would seem like the very first thing you would want in a Supreme Court justice.
Yes.
Yeah, in a judge, yes, good judgment, and it seems like she just lacks that. Her apologizing to an offender she was about to sentence to 3 months in jail, a child porn offender, like he is owed no apology. The reason he is there is because he is wronged he has committed a wrong in a way that the state recognizes and insists on punishment for. So there's no apology to be made. It's everything about her perspective on criminal justice, I think, is just off.
Well, I wanted to ask you, we don't have this clip, but you may have seen it. It was making the rounds. Senator Ted Cruz said that he believes that Ketanji Brown Jackson will be the most left-wing judge to have ever sat on the Supreme Court. Strong words. I mean, she's definitely going to be left-wing. The most left-wing, more so than Sotomayor. What do you think?
I think it's pretty clear that she'll be right there with Sotomayor, right? I think ultimately Sotomayor is probably more left, and also I think Ketanji Brown Jackson is definitely smarter than Sotomayor, but that's not a high bar. I think Sotomayor, is easily the least legally sophisticated of any Supreme Court justice we've had in our generation. Right, if you just read her opinions and listen to her questions on the bench, like she's just not that smart. Like
she just doesn't get it. Yeah, I mean, it's clear from the question.
She just doesn't get it.
By the way, it's not true about Kagan. I mean, it's not just a liberal conservative thing. Kagan gets it. Very, very smart. Breyer's a smart guy. I mean, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think KBJ is smarter than Sotomayor, for example.
I'd agree.
Right? Like her responses to the questions indicate a more sophisticated understanding of the law. Sotomayor thinks there's a federal police power, for instance. This is basic con law 101. But that said, even that's not a high bar. It shouldn't be the bar to be on the Supreme Court for a life tenure. And it's almost like the Democrats got indignant that she was being asked questions about her record, which is easily the fairest thing to ask questions about when it comes to the Supreme Court justice. And basically they don't want to talk about it. I guess the only real accomplishment here is that Democrats aren't able to trumpet this as some massive victory, because they could, they got 3 Republicans, the flakiest 3 Republicans to vote and nobody else. 53-47 is not good for judicial confirmation.
Yeah, well, I have to say it's pretty clear, right, that Collins and Maine, Murkowski up in Alaska. First of all, as far as I'm concerned, Murkowski should be finished in the party. She voted against Kavanaugh, unforgivable. Straight up unforgivable for any Republican to have voted against Kavanaugh, which is outrageous, and everybody needs to be reminded of that. Collins, she wants to keep her job, and she's doing a little of this, a little of that. We'd rather have her than the alternative, a little, but it's squishy.
Any Republican vote, or a Republican in Maine, anything we get is gravy. It's like how the Democrats mistreat Joe Manchin, and they should just realize that they get any votes out of him at all, and it's just wonderful, because he's in West Virginia, which, the moment Joe Manchin leaves office, that seat will turn into a permanent Republican Senate seat, and it will be one of the hardest Republican votes in the Senate. There will never be another moderate. Like, that's just, West Virginia is hard right now. So that's kind of how I look at Susan Collins, like essentially the reverse of Joe Manchin, where, she's in Maine. Maine's not a red state. We'll see, the fact that we are even getting some Senate votes out of her is amazing. But Lisa Murkowski, really? Alaska's a red state. Like, be conservative, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it was upsetting when she cast that vote initially, but that was what she decided to do. Will, always appreciate the perspective. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
The Russian military appears to have withdrawn most of its troops from the area around Kyiv and the surrounding suburbs. The war in Ukraine enters a new phase. Does the Ukrainian military have the remaining strength to continue the fight? I'll ask Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Bill Roggio in a moment. The Russian military has largely completed its withdrawal from around Kyiv and its surrounding suburbs after a stronger than expected defense likely caused them to abandon the fight for Ukraine's capital. Russia claims it will now focus its efforts on eastern Ukraine, where its forces have seen moderate gains since launching its invasion in February. Both Russian and Ukrainian forces have been battered over a month of combat, but does Ukraine have the capability to go on the offensive? Joining me now is Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's Bill Roggio. Bill, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Buck. Thanks for having me.
So first off, what do you make of the Russian pullback from the Kyiv region, the capital city area? Was this an orderly withdrawal? Was this a beaten army that was heading for the hills? What was going on here?
I do think the withdrawal was orderly from a military perspective. They didn't flee. They were able to pull back their forces intact, but it came on because it happened because of the stiff and fierce Ukrainian defense. The Russian military clearly realized it wasn't going to take Kiev. And I think this was one of several key objectives, of course, the East and the South being others. The Russians realized that it would have to pour more forces into Kiev, and it wasn't going to be able to succeed in Kiev as well as in the South and the East by doing so. So it decided to focus its efforts in the South and East, which are the other two key objectives. I know, this did not go as planned for the Russians. I think it's surprising. It's surprising for myself and a lot of people. It seems like the Russians bit off a little bit more than they could chew when it came to trying to take Kiev, and it's definitely a stinging loss for the Russians.
The UK Ministry of Defense put out this map of Ukraine showing the current disposition of troops and contested area. Russian troops largely driven from areas around Kyiv, as you can see here. So what's going on? I mean, the eastern region, the fighting, eastern and southern region of the country, the fighting continues on. Those red areas people can see on the map. If Putin is able to connect those and consolidate, to solidify his gains, if you will, in those areas, territorial gains, is that enough for him to call a cease to the rest of the operation, you think? Would that be sufficient? How do you see this?
I do think that ultimately what Putin wanted was to cleave about a quarter of Ukraine, to take those eastern and southern areas. And this would put the Ukrainian government in a bind. I've always felt that was the ultimate goal of the operation. Seizing Kyiv would have greatly contributed to that. It would have really put the government in a bind. But the Ukrainian government still has major problems. In the East, the supply lines are shorter for the Russians. The Russians are fighting better in the East. You can see they've taken territory and held it. And they're even advancing. It's a slow grind, which is what I expected from the South and from the North as well. There's a large number of Ukrainian troops that are particularly deployed along the Donbass front. And this, if they could be surrounded, if the Ukrainian military loses a significant portion of its military, then yes, Putin can still, despite the loss in Kiev, can still walk away and have a victory, because this ultimately would leave a weakened Ukrainian government and a buffer zone that Russia greatly desires in the East, and also would cut Ukraine off from the sea. That's another key objective. And that's the operation in the South.
Is it possible that Ukraine could muster the firepower here to go on the offensive and actually drive the Russians from some of the areas, including in the East, where they've actually been able to establish greater control?
I think it's possible. They're going to need more armor and more heavy equipment. This can't be done with light anti-tank weapons and Stinger missiles. The Russians have been able to establish air superiority in areas in the South and East, and they're using it to their effect in its combat operations, and Russian armor is operating more freely here. Now, keep in mind, so Russia's pouring more of some of the units that were in and around Kyiv. So are the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians, their disadvantage is their supply lines are longer. The Western supplied weaponry can blunt the Russian offensive. That's what we saw happen in Kyiv. But whether it could drive it out, that's the real question. I think they're going to need more heavy equipment. And it's also possible they can bleed the Russians enough. But I think without that armor, it's going to be very difficult.
What kind of a difference do you think would you assess the weapons that have already made their way to Ukraine? What kind of difference have they made? You're seeing more and more reporting about the variety of weapons and the volume of them that the Western allies here, the U.S., NATO allies have delivered to Ukraine. Has that just been a key component that the Kremlin wasn't able or did not calculate for in the early stages?
I think so. And I think it was key in blunting that Russian offensive on the capital of Kyiv. And again, these didn't drive the Russians out. The Russians did execute a withdrawal here. The Ukrainian success in its counterattacks in and around Kyiv were limited. It only made real gains when Russia withdrew from that ground. So, just alone in defending the capital, it made a significant difference. The Ukrainians won the first real battle of this war in and around the capital. It is an impressive victory. But whether this translates to victory in the South and the East, that remains to be seen.
And of the calls for a war crimes tribunal, and I mean, look, the reporting and the images, the reality of what we're all being shown in Bucha is gut wrenching. It's horrific. It is clear evidence of war crimes being committed. Is it really feasible? What would be the mechanism? Is it possible that any of Putin's generals might actually be held accountable at some future point for this? Or if they stay in Russia, are they effectively going to be safe no matter what? How do you see that? Because there's a lot of talk from Tony Blinken, from the Biden administration, about how they will look into war crimes. Well, who will enforce it if the war crimes are found to have been committed?
Yeah, the enforcement is the real issue here. I'm sure trials can be held and evidence presented, but there won't be a defense because the Russians are not part of the International Criminal Court, so that won't be a mechanism. And without a doubt, unless there is some type of regime change that wants to settle this issue inside of Russia, the generals and those responsible for these war crimes and the very clear evidence, as you said, of war crimes, unless there's some major shakeup inside of Russia, the government of Russia, Putin, will not want his generals to sit in front of a tribunal.
And where do you see this? How long? I mean, first off, do you see this going, given the reality of the pullback from Kyiv, some of the continued fighting in the east and the south? There's been some reporting that by May, Putin wants to have this effectively declared he'll say a successful operation, but the end of the operation. Does that align with the timeline that you're seeing?
I think, we have to look months out at this point. When this war began and Kyiv was, when the government was actually saying was preparing for a government in exile, that's how dire the situation was. We were looking at, 1 to 2 months where this operation could be completed. But now I think we have to look at, in a 3 to 6 month timeline. And again, it all depends on how effective a defense the Ukrainians are able to put up. But if Putin came to the table today, if he stopped military, if he halted and dug in, he's made considerable gains. And President Zelensky has already conceded that he won't join NATO, that he would agree to some type of neutral status. Obviously, the status of the territories that are taken by the Russians would have to be negotiated. But if the fighting stopped today, Putin could technically declare a victory and get up some type of settlement. But I don't think it's going to be the one that he actually wanted.
Bill, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Buck. Always a pleasure.
The White House can't seem to give a straight answer when it comes to the question about when it's appropriate to teach children about sex and gender. It's not that hard, guys, you'd think, but that story and more in Quick Hits. Stay with us. New York City Mayor Eric Adams spends big bucks to attract gay Floridians to the Big Apple, and Joe Biden just can't stop lying. Lying Biden, no surprise. Those stories on Quick Hits. Let's get right into it. Now you may have seen this. New York City, which we talked about a little bit today in the program, is going through a continued upsurge in crime, or upswing, a surge in crime. The streets are dirty. People are fleeing the city for other places. It's not doing well right now. But New York City Mayor Eric Adams thinks that what he needs to focus on is convincing Floridians who are gay to move to New York because of the Parental Rights and Education bill, which activists said was the Don't Say Gay bill, which is not even in the bill. Here's New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Watch this one.
This political showmanship of attempting to demonize a particular group or community is unacceptable. And we are going to loudly show our support and say to those who are living in Florida, listen, we want you here in New York. We want you right here in New York City. And it's more than just saying that. It's also standing up and aligning ourselves with the men and women of the LGBTQ plus community and stating that we are in unison with you in your right to have self-identification, your right to live the lifestyle and live the lives that you choose to live without any form of harassment.
I'm just wondering, has the mayor of New York ever been to South Beach in Miami? Just ever been to Miami or any major city in the state of Florida where there's a thriving gay community? Because that's the reality down there. And no one's leaving because they're so worried about the Don't Say Gay bill, because that's not actually even in the bill. But he doesn't really care. He would much rather go and do everything in his power to use this as a moment of propaganda for the Democrat Party. Speaking of bills and questions that come up from them, so the parental rights and education bill in Florida, which is what Mayor Eric Adams was referring to when he says that you can't, be safe or free in your community, whatever, it's a total lie. But it does say that you can't teach children in Florida public schools about sex, gender identity, and sexuality between the ages of kindergarten and third grade. So this is a huge outcry from the left over this. Democrats get very upset. Peter Doocy of Fox News asked the White House press secretary, okay, when does Joe Biden think children should learn in school, not from their parents, in school, about sex, gender theory, transgenderism, pansexualism, etc.? This is what Jen Psaki said.
At what age does the White House think that students should be taught about sexual orientation and gender identity?
Well, I would say, first of all, Peter, we have spoken to the Don't Say Gay bill in the past, I believe is what you're referring to, and made clear that as we look at this law, what we think it's a reflection of is politicians in Florida propagating misinformed, hateful policies that do absolutely nothing to address the real issues. The Department of Education is well positioned and ready to evaluate what to do next, and its implementation, whether its implementation violates federal civil rights law. But I would note that parents across the country are looking to national, state, and district leaders to support our nation's students, to ensure that kids are treated equally in schools, and that is certainly not. This is not a reflection of that.
No answer from her. Just note that. No answer. None. Strange, right? Strange. You'd think she'd be able to give a pretty straightforward answer on that one. Also notice that she uses the fake name of the bill. It's not the Don't Say Gay bill, it's the Parental Rights and Education Act, but she's a left-wing activist. She just happens to work for the White House. Then there was this today. Barack Obama, we're gonna skip the truck driving thing for a second here, guys. Barack Obama was at the White House, and Barack Obama is still the biggest name, biggest brand of the Democrat Party, even though Joe Biden is president. So this happened. Watch. Everybody wants to talk to Obama. Joe is the president of the United States. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Hey, what can you do? As ever, tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is next. Fields high.